Good morning, Seekers, and welcome back to the Critical Grays podcast. I'm your co-host, Bodhi, also known as Bodhi on the Discords, and I am joined by my co-host, Ethan, also known as Jabroni Apologist on the Discord.
Hello.
Ethan, would you rather fight one spellbound gargoyle that is the size of a Blood Feast raptor, or 5 Blood Feast raptors that are the size of spellbound gargoyles?
I don't know. We know that the gargoyles can cast spells out of that horrible little mask on their faces. So not only would it be pretty big, but it might be able to like twin flame me or something. Whereas the Blood Feast raptors are mean and all, but they are in fact at the end of the day just kind of birds. I'd be fighting birds, which doesn't sound fun. But I think I could take a few birds. So I'm gonna go with the second option. Give me the 5 Blood Feast raptors.
Okay. I don't know. I think that I'm kind of in the opposite camp. I'd rather take just the one big dude.
I don't know. I don't want to be pummeled to death specifically by like human feet either, I think is the
Ooh.
problem.
Yeah. The feet do sound terrible.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, with that on the books, today we're going to be joined by VictusDrake, and we're talking about Thundersteps.
The big guy.
We've got about 2.5 hours of some fascinating, exhilarating discussion. So I hope that you guys enjoy. You learned a lot, and we will see you in the next episode. All right. Well, we are here with Lawrence, aka VictusDrake. Why don't you tell us a little about your history playing Malediction?
Uh, yeah, I picked up Malediction pretty much bang on a year ago, a little bit over a year ago now, at the last UK Games Expo in Birmingham, which is a really, really big games expo, really nice games expo, loads of board games from kind of all over the world, loads of really weird indie board games. I think I had seen like 1 or 2 adverts on Instagram for Malediction as well. And it just kind of happened to be a nice convergence of a bunch of things that I liked. And also, they were selling physical copies of like the old faction decks specifically, which were essentially you could only get them at conventions and if you back the Kickstarter. But essentially, it was a deck box that was just all of the faction cards, and it came with an STL, and it had a much lower price point than the faction box, which came with all of the standees and things. So I played a demo game, and I thought the game was great fun. I then looked at the minis and kind of thought to myself, like, well, even if I can't get any of my friends to play this game, all of these minis are still really cool, and I own a 3D printer, and I play a lot of things like D&D. So the kind of more generic ones, I figured would work really well. So I picked up the faction box for Primal Blood, and I picked up the faction deck, I should say, for Primal Blood, and I picked up the faction deck for Order of the Shattered Throne, because I thought those were kind of the two factions that looked most like things that I could probably play in D&D campaigns that I was planning at the time. And then kind of just ended up like I went home and joined the Discord and ended up kind of playing the game a lot online, predominantly to begin with, and was very invested in the game. They still do. There's kind of a monthly online league. And so, through the online league, it meant that I was able to kind of regularly play the game. And I think I played Thundersteps almost exclusively for quite a while, like the first 3 to 6 months that I was playing the game. I pretty much exclusively played Thundersteps because I just thought he was such great fun. But yeah, then they released the Herald program, and they also recruited another round of playtesters, and I ended up getting into both of those. I have since met the team. I've met Fabio, their kind of head of games. I've met some of their marketing team when I was at the UK Games Expo this year, and I helped out the booth. And so that was really nice. And so kind of essentially over the course of the year, I have fully ingratiated myself. I like to think both with the community and the company to some degree, which is quite nice. And I think it's a game with a good community. It's got people, the people that make the game really care about the game, which is always nice as well. And yeah, that kind of, I guess, brings us up to today. Now I run kind of a regular monthly game at my local games club called Northern Alliance Games in Newcastle. I'm going to plug that. We do a monthly Malediction night, first weekend of the month, every month. And also, I'm currently looking at organizing kind of a much bigger, like, North England tournament between me and another herald in Scotland. So yeah, that's about where I'm at.
Sweet. So, as a playtester, you obviously have seen all of the new stuff coming out. Using exactly one very vague word, I want you to describe the next wave of product.
Rad.
Excellent.
It's rad.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, have you ended up using any models for your D&D games?
Yeah, I ended up using some of the Primal Blood stuff. I used the Tarok Beasts and the Blood Feast Raptor in a like desert encounter that my players did recently. It ended up being quite a cool encounter. There was like a giant worm, which I got from, I think it was a Loot Studios model. I'm pretty sure it was. And so big giant worm that comes in kind of 3 segments from Loot Studios, who are, obviously the kind of parent company for Malediction. And it looks like a worm that's then kind of moving through the sand, if that makes sense. So you've got the tail, and the tail looks like it's going into the ground, and then you've got a middle section that is both coming out of and kind of going into the ground, and then a head. And as the players are trying to kind of fight this colossal worm, I'm also like, hey, this fight is now attracting scavengers. You're now going to have to deal with this weird Blood Feast Raptor type thing and some Tarok Beasts. Have fun.
Fun.
Hell yeah.
They were not pleased, but it was great.
Well, you mentioned that you had played a lot of Thundersteps, and that's why we've got you here today. We're talking the big guy, and we're going to learn all about how to charge straight into battle and go and crush some people. So, Ethan, why don't you start us off with a little bit about Thundersteps' lore?
All right. Well, this won't take too long because Thundersteps is not an overly complicated character. However, I'll give it my best. So, the Primal Blood and the world of Malediction is an interesting sort of. It's a way of life, a set of ethnic groups, kind of a loose nation-state confederacy deal. Basically, it's the people who remained loyal to the Gaia-type mother goddess who created all the world, and that her demigod children were very worried she'd get sick of in short order and destroy. So they put her to sleep by, doing the big... How do I even describe it? They shot a massive metal rod into the earth to like force her into a coma and siphon off her power, and that metal rod is at the center of the Malediction today. So essentially they did that, and they're all, giving each other high fives, patting each other on the back for saving the world. But Avacra, one of the 13 demigod everlasting figures, never really was fully into it and quickly began to basically heavily regret her decision. And she started hearing the dreams and rants of the mother goddess in her dreams. So she essentially gathered a following of people interestingly, like from all of the different species and subspecies in this setting, it's a very multicultural group in that setting. And it's like, if we remain loyal to the Mother Goddess, she's not going to Ragnarok us. She's just going to Ragnarok everybody else, which who knows if that's true. But basically, she was, in short order, murdered by our friends of the Triumvirate, and her entire cast of followers put into bondage, where they remained for basically the entirety of the Everlasting War, up until, 1,000 years ish before the current setting. But now they're free again because the throne got shattered. It's the Order of the Shattered Throne now, don't you know? So now they are an incredibly diverse group of peoples living in all the worst conditions and the harshest terrains all over the continent. And the thing that unites them is they all hold true to the Mother Goddess, and they don't take too kindly to organized civilization. So Thundersteps is a guy. He showed up out of the Malediction one day with a giant jewel, which is his legacy, called Storm's Eye, lodged where his implied to be one normal eye should have been. He seems like he's a Cyclops kind of guy. Massive, powerful, turgid, just terrifying freak of nature. Seems to be the only one of his kind. Just popped out of the Malediction one day, just sort of wandering around. And basically, he just started killing. He's really good at it. Not a lot can get in his way and survive. And most of what he was killing was stuff from the Order of the Shattered Throne, which of course caught the eye of the shamans who run, or kind of are the cultural and political heads of the Primal Blood. And Thundersteps we don't even know what his name is. Like, that's the name they gave him. He speaks a completely different language, and he seems to have his complete own agenda. It's just that he seems to be killing people, and he seems to be sort of, at least hypothetically, doing it in the name of the Mother Goddess. He seems to be killing a lot of her enemies. So the Primal Blood just kind of follows him around now. And he's not a leader. That would be too exact a term. But he's certainly in charge wherever he goes.
I think I would say he's more a leader in that they just kind of follow him around.
Exactly.
He's in charge.
Yes. It is worth noting, kind of interesting that, like, and we'll get to this when we get to an Ingor episode, there are elements of the Primal Blood who don't trust him or think that he's no good, or are just like unhappy that he's, the prodigal child at the moment. So they're not all united behind him, but he has wide-ranging support. And best we can tell, we get a little snippet of kind of his inner monologue, essentially. And that's all the real information we get about him, is he is from ancient extinct race that was either enslaved or wiped out, probably by the Triumvirate back in the day. He might actually be from before the Great Everlasting War. It's very unclear how old he is. But the jewel in his head was put there against his will. It's immensely powerful, and it basically radiates rancid vibes wherever he goes, so that everybody gets worked up into a frothing blood frenzy. Which is pretty effective if you need to lead a bunch of like barbarian-type dudes into battle. But he's, for the record, miserable. He can barely sleep. He's constantly just angry all the time and like barely lucid. And the gem seems to be like guiding him somewhere deep into the Malediction, and he's basically like, I gotta go and see what's in there because I really don't want to be like this anymore. So he's not having a great time either. Nobody's having a great time when it comes to Thundersteps.
He also holds the title of the only person with a lore entry in the FAQ document. Which is that there is an FAQ that says, what language does Thundersteps speak? And the answer is, we don't know. We'd ask him if we could. Or something along those lines.
There are some shamans that claim that they know how to speak his language, but they won't tell anybody. So,
How convenient.
Yep. So he's after something that the legacy he has, the Storm's Eye, seems to be leading him to. But the legacy seems to have been implanted against his will. He might have been from some sort of slave or warrior race from the War of the Everlasting. But, like, that was a long time ago, and, like, humans are just the ones that survived. There were a bunch of, like... They were pumping out all sorts of different, like, humanoid subspecies for that war. We really don't know too much beyond that. He doesn't know himself.
Sounds like another upstanding citizen.
Yes, definitely. He's a citizen of the world. He goes where he wants.
Well, sweet. I guess let's get moving on into a little about what Thundersteps does. So he's a 10 cost seeker, unit seeker Tyran.
That's like his
He's
race, I think, his
Yeah, he's the
Cyclops sky
only
race.
one with this type, for obvious reasons, as we just discussed. He has an accuracy of 5, a power of 7 on a hit, and 3 on a graze, a range of 0, a speed of 6, a defense of 12, a health of 20, and he's got 3 skills. Berserk 2, while this unit's health is lower than or equal to half of its health, it gets plus 2 power. Cleave, whenever this unit defeats a nearby enemy with a melee attack, it may perform a free melee attack. And Devastate 3, this unit deals 3 extra damage on critical hits. So, Lawrence, why don't you tell us a little about, what are the key takeaways here? What makes this card strong?
I think, yeah, to my knowledge, like base stat wise, Thundersteps is the kind of strongest all round seeker. So the combination of +5 accuracy and then the 7/3 power ekes him out just slightly over Vorendell on kind of pure stats alone, because obviously Vorendell is also +5, but Vorendell is then only 6/3. Where then most other seekers are 5/3 or 4/3, kind of in that sort of region. Karmamuk comes close as well, with a total power of 10 as well, but she's 6/4, so smaller range, but same kind of consistency in damage, if that makes sense. Like you'll deal 10 damage over a couple of turns. But then obviously Karmamuk only has 2 accuracy, which isn't as good. But then when you then kind of take that into a picture that includes everything else, his stats are, including everything else, kind of either about average or like miles better. So when you then take this into a context of like other units and things as well. So obviously 5 accuracy, 7/3 damage is miles better than pretty much every other unit in the game, and is still better than every other seeker. The 6 movement is then better than Vorendell, for example, who obviously only has 5 as kind of the closest in terms of damage potential. You do have some seekers like Sigrith who can do a 2 AP thing to do a comparable amount of damage. But even then, Thundersteps could theoretically hit twice and do more damage than Sigrith could do with a smite. His kind of main letdown, obviously, is his 12 defense, but even 12 defense is about average. I'm off the top of my head. I think it's pretty much in the middle, as far as kind of the range of defense of all units. Obviously, for Seekers, it's one of the lower ones. In fact, it might be the lowest for Seekers. I couldn't say that for certain.
It's tied for highest as far as Primal Blood is concerned.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, but yeah, this, and I guess this is what I'm getting at, is that his defense is pretty average, his movement is pretty average, but then his other kind of 3 stats that he's got going for him are ludicrously higher than most other people. The 20 health, whilst 2 health might not seem like much more, on average this gives him another kind of 1 or 2 hits wiggle room over every other seeker, which is quite important, depending on kind of who's coming into it, like who's actually trying to attack him.
Remember, kids, the only health point that matters is the last one.
Exactly. And so if you have 2 health points more than somebody, you've got a whole extra health point that you can play with. And then on top of that, his abilities just kind of make him silly. Berserk is a very funny thing when your opponent kind of goes, haha, I finally have Thundersteps down to half health, and you, the Thundersteps player, goes, fantastic, that's exactly where I want him to be. Thank you for doing that. I couldn't do that myself. I'm now doing 9 damage on a hit, and that's before we add anything else into this mix. Cleave, like, I think on a lot of units, cleave is often kind of not a big deal, because it's quite rare that another unit will charge in and kill something, which then kind of means that, like, okay, now I have to stand here, pray that I don't die, go around to my next whole turn, hope that my opponent hasn't moved things out of the way. Whereas Thundersteps can quite confidently go, oh, there are 2 guys stood next to each other, I charge and I kill one of them and I cleave into the other one, and now they are both dead. And we'll get on to what a terrifying combination that is when you put some Scout's boots on him later, I imagine.
Oh yeah.
And then Devastate on top of that. Like, Devastate is just a really nice kind of cherry on top. Like 3 extra damage on a crit doesn't really, it does, you know, this is a literal 5% chance that this comes up. But when it does come up, that's then the difference between I haven't killed, you know, a Citadel crossbowman in 1 hit versus I have now killed a Citadel crossbowman in 1 hit. Which you would have been doing anyway with the combined damage, but that even then pushes you up to, like, I can kill I'm trying to think of a 12 health unit off the top of my head. Most things in Conclave, you know, in 1 hit. Like, I think the shield mages are 12 health with resistance 1. So, like, you can still kill a shield mage in 1 hit if you get a crit, and that's not even including anything from his legacy. So if you want to do a really big number and you want to sit there adding all of your numbers together and watching as your opponent's face gets more and more horrified as this number of damage points that they have just suffered gets bigger and bigger, play Thundersteps, because it's a great feeling.
Yeah. If you are at your Berserk level of health and roll a crit, you can one-shot Seekers like Morida and Pollinor.
Yeah.
That's kind of goofy.
If you're at God, I do the maths on this every single time I talk about him, but if you crit and are berserked and have charged, I think only the 18 health seekers survive. Which is
that's if you get the scythe or something, you know.
Yeah. Then
just get
you
out of
kill
town.
pretty much everything in 1 hit.
We actually don't have it marked down anywhere else in our notes, so I want to bring it up now, but you mentioned Scout's boots, so I'll read those off. This is a bronze or a basic attachment item, costs 2, and it gives the unit +2 to its speed and the ability hit and run. Whenever this unit defeats an enemy, it may perform a free move. So this combos really well with the cleave ability, because whenever you're the active player, you can resolve those 2 effects in whichever order you'd like. So you can literally just run around, and as long as you're killing things with 1 shot, just run around like a madman, swinging your axe mace thing, and just like wipe a whole swarm of units.
I believe the term is a maul.
There we go.
One of the really cool things to be aware of with that combo as well is that in the most recent FAQ, after it was a game that Pat and I were playing. Pat is another content creator for this game, but anyway, we were playing a game where I killed a bunch of things with cleave, and I also had the Scout's boots, and so I went, cool, I now have 3 hit and runs to resolve. And Pat kind of went, that can't be how that works, and we both kind of were like, I don't know, actually, I have no idea how this works, and so we ended up putting that in for an FAQ, and in the most recent FAQ it was clarified that yes, you would have 3 hit and runs to resolve at that point. So if you charge into, let's say you charge into 2 things, you kill the first one, you cleave into the second one, you now have 2 hit and runs to resolve, which at that point is 8 inches of movement per hit and run. So you can then send Thundersteps careening across the board 16 inches away and have a cleave to resolve at the end of it, which is fantastic. It's very funny.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah,
Yep.
that is entertaining. Speaking of Pat, he mentioned in one of his videos that you hadn't beaten him yet. Has that
Oh
changed?
god damn it. Why did he say it? Yes, it's true. He is my white whale. Every time we play a game, I was really mad as well. I psyched myself out of beating him in the last game that we played. Um, because I was playing Thundersteps into, I want to say he was playing Ingor, maybe Auric. I can't remember which one. But essentially, it was a situation where all I had to do was kill one of his units. Um, and it was a Paxos Gorehorn had to um, land a hit, I think it was, or something like that. And the Paxos Gorehorn would have killed this unit. Um, at which point I would have ticked up to 40 mastery and won the game. But if the Paxos Gorehorn had grazed, then I wouldn't have won the game that turn. And there was an uncontested relic. I think Pat was going to pick it up or something like that. But essentially, I was sat there, and any other game, I'm looking at like a Valkyrus Priest with like 11 defense or something like that. I have a Paxos Gorehorn with +3 to hit, and I'm sat there like, if I graze, I'm gonna lose again because then he'll take that relic and I'm not gonna win. Rather than just going, come on, man, just roll the dice and hit the goddamn Valkyrus Priest. Like you've got a good chance of doing this. He'll probably die. And I psyched myself out of it, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go and shift, and I'm gonna cover that relic because that's the more strategic thing to do. And then I lost the game the next turn, and I was so mad at myself.
So it
Um,
goes.
So it goes exactly.
Well, we will check back in next time we have either you or Pat on the podcast, and I expect a change.
God, I hope so.
You have you have until the Laundriel episode.
Okay,
Oh,
I'll get
God.
right on it.
Okay, great. Well, we've talked a bit about Storm's Eye and how Thundersteps came to acquire it in his face. Um, let's read what it does. So this is a legacy unique to Thundersteps. You have a starting echo of 25, and it has two abilities. Relentless Surge. Whenever you activate an ally you own, you may discard a card. If you do, that ally moves up to 3 inches. And Brutal Charge. While performing a charge, allies you own get +2 power and gain knockback 5. So whenever the unit scores a hit, it may push the defender up to 5 inches. What is the what's the sauce here? What is Storm's Eye good for?
So Storm's Eye is fantastic at mitigating the problem of being aggressive comes with downsides. So if you've got the age-old kind of problem in this game, just like most other games, where if you're being aggressive, you're probably also taking a lot of the control out of your own hands. So normally, pretty much every other seeker in the game, if I charge you, I am now making one attack, and then I stand next to you, and you get to hit me twice, and that sucks. That's real bad. Brutal Charge negates that. It's essentially like, so long as you're not charging something that's stood up against a wall, you can do knockback, and even if you only move them just outside of nearby, they have to spend an action point to come back in, and you have essentially negated that whole idea of, well, they now get to just activate and punch me twice. So it means that you have a lot more control over kind of when you want to charge things, rather than kind of having to play the waiting game, which I think a lot of other Seekers have to do, where you're trying to wait for your opponent to activate their really strong things so that you're not charging into the really strong thing and getting hit twice by the really strong thing. And also, like, extra damage is just nice. This makes a Paxos Gorehorn, which is a 3 cost, into a 6/4 on a charge. It's insane. Like a Tarok Beast with Swarm is a 6/4. That's ridiculous. It costs 2 Echo. That's absurd. But yeah, and then on top of that, Relentless Surge is really helpful. Predominantly because I think most opponents forget about Relentless Surge. It's the main reason why it's really helpful, because your opponent does all of their measuring and they go, cool, excellent, I've checked, you're 3 inches out, you're I don't know, you're 12 inches away from me, or 13 inches or 14 inches or whatever, you can't charge me. over to you, and you go, cool, I'm going to activate this guy, and I'm going to discard this card to move 3 inches, and your opponent goes, oh, god damn it, I forgot you could do that. But it's also really useful to ensure that your positioning is kind of exactly what you want. So there's loads of really handy things that you can do of like, you can actually hide things behind walls with Thundersteps and then still do a relentless surge to move out of that wall to then charge things. You can it's really helpful for making sure that your knockback kind of goes where you need it to go, because obviously charges can only go in a straight line. So having, or I suppose along a line of sight is probably a more technically accurate way of saying that. So then being able to kind of change that angle by shifting, 3 inches one way or the other is incredibly helpful. I think the main thing that I think about Thundersteps' legacy is that it's very straightforward in principle, but I think that understanding what Storm's Eye is helpful for makes you significantly better at the game. Understanding when positioning is important, understanding like card management in hand is really important. Like understanding why knockback is useful is so important. Understanding when to do, knockback is important. So I think that people look at it and think that it's really straightforward, but that and don't get me wrong, it is very straightforward, but to make the most of it, you have to be quite good at the very fundamentals of this game. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's what makes it such a great legacy, is because Thundersteps is meant to be kind of one of the easier seekers to play, and to some degree he's teaching you how to play the whole game better by encouraging you to make the best use of his legacy.
Yeah, I think all that's very accurate. There's a lot more going on under the hood. It's kind of one of the things that makes this game great, I think, is most of it is principally pretty simple, but the interactions are almost like endless. Just to add on a little bit of what you're saying, I've been cramming Thundersteps games in last couple weeks, getting ready for this. And my my favorite thing to do is Thundersteps really likes having the initiative, I think, because he loves his big alpha strike. But you're not always going to have it. And one of my favorite things to do is just feeling like, okay, I'm going to put, it's round 2 or 3. Here comes Thundersteps. I'm going to slap him down somewhere in the middle of the board. And your opponent's like, well, he's not engaged with anybody, that, right? It's like, even though his charge is good, like, you're giving up a bunch of damage by having him start unengaged. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And then I'll activate Thundersteps. And I'm like, oh, he's going to move 3 into engagement.
Yeah.
And then hit twice. And that also keeps your opponent from being able to double tap him, which,
Yep.
Thundersteps likes being heard a bit more than most, but, you do have to be careful. It's very easy to kind of fall into like, oh yeah, he'll be fine, and then he gets eaten somewhere. So yeah, I think the movement isn't just great for charging and getting the best angle, especially if you're like running the red terrain or if it's on the board. It's like, if you get that 3 inches, you can maybe come in at an angle that leads to like an ability to push somebody into the Kool-Aid. But you can also be like, yeah, I'm going to start out of engagement with this deployment. It is up to you to come in and engage me. And if you don't, I'm going to come to you. And I'm still going to get 2 attacks.
It combos phenomenally well with so many different units in the deck as well. Like you say, kind of that little extra bit of movement to kind of get into engagement is always useful. But even things of like, you now functionally have 9 inches of range on a battle cry from a spirit shaman without ever having to move, kind of thing, is really useful. You can use it on a Boneclaw Raider to dip out of combat because the Boneclaw Raider has nimble, charge back into combat, and then dash back out of combat all in one activation. Like, it just makes so many of your units so flexible. Hell, if you want to, you can use it on Thundersteps while he's in engagement and try and bait your opponent into lowering his health more and then charging back in and doing even more damage. It's great.
Yep. I think he's kind of paired with Sigrith in his basic functionality in that both of them like have to dump cards in order to get the best out of their legacy. And I would say that is kind of something to really consider when you compare uh, this guy's legacy in Sigrith to the other two mono color casters. Is Pollinor and Vorindal are like they kind of get more options for free almost out of their legacies. But Thundersteps and to an extent Sigrith, you do have to be kind of aware of like you're pulling from one resource and it's the same resource you use to bring out new units and cast spells and stuff.
Yeah. I often kind of say that those are the two seekers that I think their legacies teach you a lot about how to actually play the game.
Right.
Whereas Vorindel and Pollinor both have great legacies in kind of their own right, but those are more, I guess, legacies that will teach you how to build a deck to play the game, because their legacies are so focused on kind of the deck building side of it. Whereas Thundersteps and Sigrith are both kind of focused on the actual, in the game, how do we get the most out of this? And so to some degree, it almost doesn't matter how you build your deck around those two legacies. There are obviously, better and or worse ways to build decks around these legacies, but in the thick of it, what you're really kind of learning with these two seekers is the value of your cards as a resource, which is a really important thing in the game.
It's kind of a tactics versus strategy thing. I do
Yeah.
think that Thundersteps is like a very good seeker for like teaching people just how their units are going to be on the board and their physicality, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
and how their positioning is going to affect the game state. Yeah, I'd say that's a big one.
I think it teaches you positioning probably more than any other seeker, and I think positioning is probably, in my opinion, kind of one of the most important things in this game, because at the end of the day, this game doesn't have a very big kind of swing to it as far as luck goes. You know what I mean? Like the fact that there is this concept of hits and grazes means that at the end of the day, what we're actually doing here is seeing how many times I have to spend my action points to kill you. There isn't an idea, unless you're a unit with phasing, of just getting to live. Unlike in a lot of other tabletop games where, you kind of, if you make a bad attack in another tabletop game and you roll all ones, then you kind of are just like, I can plan as much strategy as I want, but I can't come back from the fact that I just rolled all ones here. Whereas in Malediction, to some degree, you can roll nothing but grazes for the entire game, and so long as other things are going your way, you can still kind of claw back a win. Don't get me wrong, it's hard, but but it is doable. And so I think that Thundersteps kind of teaches you that quite fundamental part of the game of, like, the resource management and the positioning is so much more important than just, I'm just going to roll a dice and hope that I hit. Though I will say, I think Thundersteps is probably one of the seekers. I think he is probably the person in the game that a Nat 1 will change the direction of a game more than absolutely anybody else in the game. If you're positioning for a charge and you have Berserk off and you go from dealing, like 11 I think that's 11 damage on a charge with Berserk to 1, yeah, you may well have lost that game on that Nat 1.
Alrighty. So let's get in a little bit into the terrain options. I think we both mentioned the Flesh Gardens. You said that was your pick of choice.
That's always my pick of choice. People, I've seen lots of other opinions about why kind of various other terrains are the better choice, and I think all of those opinions are totally valid. Making Thundersteps go faster with the Astarion pathways, or making all of his units go faster with the Astarion pathways. That's great. I think that's that, and it is a really good strategy. But I think that the kind of overlooked side of the Flesh Gardens is that people then you essentially are blocking off so much movement of your opponent that even if you never manage to line up a good knockback to get your opponent into the Flesh Gardens, you've still dictated the positioning of the whole game just with terrain positioning. And I think that that's an incredibly useful part of running Flesh Gardens. And it to some degree, then ties in with the whole idea that I was talking about in his legacy of, he teaches you why positioning is so important. That you then kind of add this in on top of the Flesh Gardens, and it teaches you how positioning can be a really punishing thing. That, if your opponent gets their positioning wrong, you can really punish that by, doing things like knockback and kicking them into the drink, and now all of a sudden you've done 6 damage to somebody.
I will also say that like the red terrain really does kind of lock down big chunks of the battlefield, because there are just going to be some builds that just they can't go in there. They'll die,
Yeah.
or they'll be so wounded that they won't be able to come out and fight. Like there are a lot of swarm decks in this game that rely on a lot of small units working together, and essentially for those small units with like 8 or even 6 health, like if a boar goes into the drink, it's not coming back out. Like they'll just be no zones.
Yeah.
Flying is not that common in this game, and you can just be like, no, you're not going to do that, and you're going to live in fear of my my Tarok beast, or not my Tarok beast, the Cabra Mauler is just going to be like, and push him in, and that's basically another hit.
Yeah, I think as well, like I think people look at the Flesh Gardens and they go, oh, it does 3 damage when you go into it. That's not that much. That's a hit. Like I could hit you with a Valkyrie's Priest and I can do 3 damage to you. Whoop-de-doo. But like it's 3 damage when you get pushed into it, and it's also 3 damage when you activate in it. Which for most units means that you end up doing 6 damage to them. Unless you can do some kind of shenanigans. But even then, you're having to do shenanigans to get them out of the drink. So I always look at it as like, if you position badly, I'm going to punish you by doing 3 damage to you. That's a non-negotiable. And then chances are, either I do another 3 damage to you as soon as you activate, which is probably going to kill most units in the game, because there are very few units in this game that have more than about 12 to 14 health. Like once you're getting past 12 health, you're talking about some real heavy hitters here, kind of thing. Even then, for them, losing 6 health is a big chunk of health. So either I'm doing 6 damage to you over the course of kind of 2 activations, which is great, or I'm doing 3 damage to you over the course of an activation, and you're then panicking and you're looking for like, can I do a battle cry on this guy just to get him out of the drink? At which point you've wasted a perfectly good battle cry. Like, are you going to use an adrenaline rush to get this guy out of the drink? Are you going to, even if you're playing Thundersteps, like, are you going to discard a card to move him 3 inches? Things like that it actually then ends up being an incredibly punishing thing that even if you get it off only once in a game, it can sometimes swing a game.
The real answer
Yeah.
is if one of your darling little wizards gets pushed into the drink, is to just move a Bahigojin next to him so that he takes all the drink damage. That's the answer.
At which point I've killed a Bahigojin, at which
right.
So I'm I'm still okay with this. I'm not mad about that. Sure, I've only got 2 mastery from it, but it's fine. I'm still pretty pleased about that. But yeah, and I think those are the kind of things where like it keeps up the pressure on your opponent in a way that I think none of the other terrain pieces do. Like, yes, it is great being able to charge Thundersteps 16 inches across the field once you've got him stood on an Astarian pathway. But that 16-inch charge probably isn't going to be the make or break change to the game. Whereas, pushing a Momentum Weaver into the Flesh Gardens, that's probably actually going to change a game quite dramatically if you can pull that off.
I'd agree, and I'd also say that an easy mistake to make in Thundersteps is actually to be a little too aggressive. Of having like one unit and just chucking at somebody, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do so much damage. And then they whiff, or the damage gets mitigated, or they just don't do enough. Or maybe they even kill something, but then you feed your opponent something that's worth more than the thing you charged at. So it can be, when you put down the pathways, I think it can be like, oh, I can go in there like round 1. And it's like, but should you?
It's a bit of a side note, but it's a really like it's a common like I'm still playing my first 5 games type of mistake that I see people making, which is where people take the Death Shroud Maya and they take a bunch of ambush units and they go, cool, and I'm going to deploy an ambush unit right outside of your deployment zone. And you go, but why? He's just going to die. Like, you put one guy in front of my entire deployment. I'm going to rip him to pieces. What are you doing?
Mhm.
I feel like this bleeds into the next section quite nicely, though. If I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we can just move on, talk about some general strategy.
um, yeah. So I guess what you were saying leads quite nicely into general strategy overview of like I think a lot of people make the mistake of being overly aggressive with Thundersteps. Equally, I do think people make the mistake of being kind of under aggressive with Thundersteps. There's a real sweet spot with him. All of kind of the stuff out of Loot Studios and out of the kind of official Malediction team talks about the ABCs of Thundersteps. Always be charging, and it's a great philosophy to live by with Thundersteps. But I think understanding when and where to charge is so vital. And if you go into the game with a concept of I'm just going to charge every opportunity that I get, then you probably will lose the game. Um, Saying that, if you get a crit somewhere in there and with Thundersteps, then you'll probably win the game because you'll then have done so much damage in the first 2 rounds that you've probably won by the end of turn 2 anyway. But if a good player will be able to I think, kind of position well enough to then bait you to charge where they want. Um, and so with Thundersteps, you need to be careful about where you're charging. You need to be trying to pick out the kind of what are your real high priority targets. One of the things that often catches me with Thundersteps is if you what I often say to people with Thundersteps is that if you haven't won the game by the end of turn 3, you're probably going to lose it by the end of turn 4. So you need to understand that you essentially have 3 turns to get 40 mastery, which is a big ask. Um, so you need to be thinking like, right, that person is worth 6 mastery. That person has a relic, so I need to be gunning for those 2 people. I'm not here trying to level the. I'm not trying to table my opponent. That's not the aim of the game here. The aim of the game is the 40 mastery, and so I need to figure out. I don't want to go and charge those two squishy guys that are stood next to each other. Those 2 dead at arms that are stood next to each other that I could get some really satisfying cleaves off of, because chances are one of them will persist, and even if they don't, that's only going to get me 6 mastery, assuming I kill both of them when
Drake.
there's a soul whisperer somewhere with a
Drake.
relic.
Drake, are you telling me that King Chud, the Seeker, is
Yeah.
forcing me to like do math? That
Yeah.
I need to actually be very aware of the math of this game when I'm playing the big barbarian with the big hunk of iron for a weapon?
Unfortunately, I think more than any other seeker in the game, you need to understand the actual underlying mathematics of this game. Of like, um, you need to understand that your attacks do this range of damage, which means that you have an idea roughly of like, it's going to take me 2 or 3 hits to kill that unit. It's going to take me, or like I should say, it's going to take me 2 or 3 attacks to kill that unit, but it's going to take me 4 or 5 attacks to kill that unit. And the unit that it's going to take me 4 or 5 attacks to kill is only worth 3 mastery, and the other one is worth 7. So I'm going to gun for the one that's going to give me 7 mastery and only take me 2 or 3 attacks to kill, even if the other one like is maybe more strategically important. Thundersteps is about the math, and you also need to be really hot on your echo as well. It's all well and good kind of drawing your opening hand and going, oh, phenomenal, I've got 4 units in this opening hand. I'm going to play all of these units because I think this is a strong opener, and then coming around to the top of turn 2 and going, oh no, I've got 8 echo, I can't play Thundersteps, and you've probably just lost yourself the game there. Uh, to be honest with you, if you do things like that, not all the time, but I think that I've seen people lose a lot of games with Thundersteps by coming around to doing something and going, "Damn, I have 2 Echo, and I really need to play an Adrenaline Rush, and I just did my math wrong. Yeah,
Yep.
unfortunately, big lunk alarm man. You need to you need to do your math.
No,
I
that's
I want to bring up, so before we started recording, you had a really interesting comment about the Cabra Mauler, which has, let me pull that up just so I can read it off for everybody. So it's got a Wild Strike ability, which is 1 action point. This unit performs a melee attack with -2 to its accuracy. On a hit, this attack deals 2 extra damage. So its usual stats are 3 accuracy, and it'll do 3 damage on a hit, 2 on a graze. If you Wild Strike, it will be a +1 to its accuracy. It'll do 5 on a hit and 2 on a graze. And you mentioned that unless there's like a few specific circumstances, you should always Wild Strike. I think that that's some really interesting math as well, because like to me, I've always considered Wild Strike as like it's kind of but I'm not a good Thundersteps player. So why don't
Oh,
you elaborate on that a little bit?
so I guess I'll put it to you another way, because -2 accuracy for 2 extra damage, right? That feels like a bad trade, right? Of like, I have a lower chance to hit, and I'm only getting 2 extra damage. But if you put this into like percent, and they're slightly different percentages, but the probability difference of Wild Strike is that you are sacrificing 10% of your chance to hit, because this is a d20 system that we're working here. So every +1 is an extra 5% chance, right? You have a 5% chance of getting every single side on a d20. So if you have a +1 to hit, you've got essentially an extra 5% chance to hit. You are giving up functionally 10% chance to hit, but 2 extra damage. The Cabramauler only deals 3 damage. You are getting almost 100% extra damage if you Wild Strike. So when you put it into those kind of terms of like, if you graze twice with the Cabramauler, you've still done 4 damage. And if if you Wild Strike and you hit twice, you have done more than an extra hit with a Cabramauler. Like, there are ways to kind of reframe this that I think explain why this is always better. Also, ages ago, somebody did the actual maths on it and just produced 2 spreadsheets and essentially pointed out that, like, over the course of like 100 attacks or something, a Cabramauler will always do more damage Wild Striking than attacking until you get up to it was something crazy high. It was like 15 odd defense. Or if the unit has phasing. If the unit has phasing, don't Wild Strike, because then if you graze, you do nothing. And the kind of math goes completely out the window. But yeah, you have to. I think you have to look at it in terms of like 2 extra damage is in a game where some things have like 8 health. Um, this is the difference between killing a Valkyrist Priest in 1 activation and killing a Valkyrist Priest over 2 activations. Like that's it's things like that that you need to be aware of with Thundersteps. You can really break the game down to its kind of really core elements when you're playing as him. Of like, this is my percentage of chance to hit, but actually, what matters is how many action points that I have. And I think because it's not on a tracker anywhere, people forget that action points are a resource. If you have 3 units on the field, you have 6 action points,
Mhm.
right? Like, and it's not on a tracker anywhere, so it's not screaming in your face that you've got 6 action points, but you have 6 action points, and you need to figure out how to win the game, with, let's say, 20 action points over the course of a game. Like, you're going to lose a unit, you're going to maybe gain a unit. Like, if you have an average of 3 units, even for 5 turns, that's really not that many action points. And so you have to figure out, within the confines of these action points, how am I going to win this game? Rather than and I think this is a hard adjustment for a lot of wargamers specifically. My background predominantly is coming from playing a lot of like Warhammer 40k and Kill Team and things like that. And so I think it's a hard adjustment for when you're coming from that side of things, because obviously if you have a negative to hit in that game, you never want to miss, because if you miss, you do nothing, and that's terrible. But that's just not the case here. And so you can still look at this and go, okay, if I'm wild striking, then a Cabramauler kills like I said, yeah, a Valkyrie's Priest in 4 grazes, and if I don't wild strike, a Cabramauler kills a Valkyrie's Priest in 3 hits. But if I do wild strike, then a Cabramauler kills a Valkyrie's Priest in 2 wild strikes, and that's such a better return on investment because action points are so scarce.
Yeah,
They're
that's
probably
fair.
the scarcest resource that you have.
Well, and you were talking about how, at least in your opinion, you need to win quickly. So
Yeah.
you're already if you're coming from a perspective of like, I'm going to lose this game if I don't do this in this time period, then
Yeah.
like the fact that you might whiff doesn't really mean much because it just means you're in the same place you started at.
Yeah. I think,
Uh,
to be honest, I do think that this game, typically in my experience, it is very rare that this game goes to more than, I would say, round 6. I think other than incredibly specific matchups like Sigrith versus Sigrith, you're
Yep.
probably not going to get to round 6 in most games. Uh, and I might also be saying this because I'm a very aggressive player. But you have to think in the organized play, you've got an hour and a half for time. So you're going to have to be playing through your turns quite quickly if you want to be coming in at under an hour and a half. And I think getting more than I say 6 turns, sorry, 6 rounds, like 6 battle rounds. Um, and so I think a lot of people, think of this game in much longer terms than maybe they should. And maybe, people kind of think like, I could get this really cool combo if I've got 3 turns of setup. And it's like, no, dude, you should be about ready to win the game, like by turn 3, not thinking of like, I finally got this cool combo ready by turn 3. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep. No, I feel you, especially with Thundersteps.
Yeah.
Another thing that you kind of brought up in the notes is that Thundersteps is like the linchpin of your deck. He's the man, but he's not the only guy.
Yeah.
And you do need to be paying due consideration to the other things in your deck and what they can do for you. I got to say personally, I think we're going to date this a little bit by saying with what we have out now, I think red kind of has a couple of holes in its lineup. And I think that part of what makes Thundersteps good is he just goes and does it himself. Like there are, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of cool red stuff, but I don't know. When I've looked at like red, like bronzes and silvers specifically, it feels like for some reason it feels like there should be a couple more of them rattling around with like slightly different abilities, and that really isn't the case. I look at something like the Cabramauler, and I'm like, but where's the second Cabramauler? Like, where's the second kind of like cheap bruiser thing? And it's like that exists in like something like green. You've got your dead at arms, but then you've also got your disgraced kinship. But red, weirdly, I think has kind of less stuff in the general ballpark of big bruiser units than you might think by looking at them in their aesthetic.
I think that's because a lot of people overlook the Paxos Gorehorn, personally. Because
Me included.
yeah, I think that people underrate the Paxos Gorehorn because people are scared of the frenzied ability. But I think again, like I find the Primal Blood are a really good thing to kind of teach you about some of the real fundamentals of the game. Of like, the frenzied ability doesn't matter if you've set up well, right? If you don't want frenzied to be a problem, then all you have to do is make it so that the Paxos Gorehorn can't make a valid charge. Put him around a corner, put another unit in the way, and all of a sudden you can't make a valid charge, so now the Paxos Gorehorn can behave as normal. Or you want the Paxos Gorehorn to make a charge, at which point this is a 3 cost that hits for 6/4 on the charge and can do a 16-inch charge. Like, its stats for its cost are insane. And the only downside is that like it has to activate first and it has to charge if it can, which is fine because Thundersteps wants things to charge. The other thing that I find as well with the Paxos Gorehorn, and it's probably the funniest and best use case for the Paxos Gorehorn, is that quite often when you come to bid for the initiative, your opponent will be looking at the board and kind of going, I think I want to bid for the initiative actually. Like I do think that like I'm looking at this board state and I'm thinking that maybe like bidding for the initiative would be really good. If I don't want my opponent to bid for the initiative and I've got a Paxos Gorehorn on the field, I will usually say to my opponent like, whoa, hang on a moment. Have you considered though that you know what I have to go first with? Which is the Paxos Gorehorn. And I would say more than half the time, my opponent at that point goes, oh, yeah, good point. No, I won't bid for the initiative. And I go, fantastic. I keep the initiative then. Please, I then get to deploy how I want to deploy. I'm going to make you deploy, kind of how I want you to deploy. I keep the initiative benefit for all of the other things that the initiative benefit gets. And I've probably positioned the Gorehorn to do exactly what I wanted it to do anyway. And it's great. It works a lot more than you'd think it would. But also now that I've said this, people are going to know and they're not going to fall for that trap
So
anymore.
yeah, the real answer to playing the Seeker is just simply gaslight your opponents. Doing exactly what you want. I think that
It's
kind of leads
actually
in.
well,
Yeah,
it's
go
it's
ahead.
hilarious that you mentioned that because in the beginning when you were giving the lore rundown and you were talking about how he just kind of showed up and people started following him, I was
Mm.
like, okay, so he's just a chronic gaslighter. And now we've come full circle.
Aha.
There, I will say there is a lot of that in Thundersteps. Like if you're playing into Sigrith, for example, you really need to be like baiting your opponent of like, I'm gonna play this spell that looks really bad, and I'm gonna hit you here, and that's gonna look really bad, and your Sigrith opponent is gonna go, oh no, I'm gonna discard a card, and then you go, haha, it was a ruse. I
Aha.
actually wanted you to get hit over here where it's much worse. You fool, you fell for it. I'm pretty sure I did exactly that actually with a game with you, Ethan, with Thundersteps,
No, you
where I
did. I
baited you
remember
into countering a spell.
that was that completely BS game where I ended up running over into your table edge
Yeah,
with two gargoyles. Yeah, no, that game was crazy.
yeah.
You the one where you crit grazed Nariev twice.
Yeah,
Um,
that was devastating. But
so
being able to bait you into countering this a bad spell, for me a not good spell, to then get off the better spell, lovely.
Mhm.
Always a high
So
point when you can do that.
speaking of cards, we should move on to our top three cards.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, as
Go on.
usual, we've got this divided into two sections. So our lovely guest has picked each of a basic, elite, and unique card. We, as hosts, have also selected our choices, and we will discuss. I do want to kind of add in that I got to the notes page second today, and so Ethan has picked all of our host choices, but I think that I agree with all of them. And we've already talked about the Scouts boots, which was the one mention that I wanted to have. Um, all right, well, let's just get into it. Lawrence has selected for his basic the Terek Beast, which is a 2-cost unit beast. It's got an accuracy of 2, a power of 3 on a hit, 1 on a graze, a range of 0, speed of 10, a defense of 11, a health of 10, and it's got Swarm 1. This unit gets +1 power on attacks against enemies engaged with another ally, and Clumsy. This unit cannot equip attachments. This guy's pretty good. He's very fast, and Swarm is also a very potent ability when you've got a bunch of units. Even when you're grazing, because it's only got an accuracy of 2, just like 2 echo for a good consistent beater like that, especially as fast as it is. But why don't you tell us about some of the other things that the Terek Beast can do?
I think for the cost of 2, this is the best value unit in the game. The own I'm trying to think. I think the only other unit Ah, no, the back. So there's only 2 other units in the game at the moment that cost 2, if I'm not mistaken, which is the Stitch Corpse and the Spellbound Behigogen. I don't think Order of the Shattered Throne has anything that costs 2 off the top of my head, but please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, they're all guys.
Yeah.
They're all guys that cost like I think the lowest one they have is like a 3 or a 4.
Yeah. So yeah, for a 2 cost, if you put him up against things like, as I said, the Stitch Corpse. The Stitch Corpse needs to have Swarm to do less damage than the Tarok Beast does on a charge in a Thundersteps deck. And that's not including the Tarok Beast's Swarm. With Swarm, the Tarok Beast does the same damage as a Stitch Corpse. No, the Stitch Corpse, sorry, goes up to 4-3, whereas the Tarok Beast only goes up to 4-2. So it does 1 less damage on a Graze than a Stitch Corpse. But I don't have to have, like, a Stitch Corpse has 3 movement and 8 defense and 8 health. Uh, like when you put it into that context of then, a Tarok Beast actually has 10 movement and 11 defense and 10 health. Like his baseline stats are absolutely insane for their value. Add to that the fact that like he is so stupidly fast. Corner to corner, the board isn't that much bigger than 20 inches. I think you get over halfway across the board with 20 inches of movement.
Yeah, it's a
So
24-inch board, right? Or 30 inches?
30,
It's 3.5 feet, whatever that is.
it's a 30, it's 30 inches by 30 inches, which means that you're getting just over halfway with a Tarok Beast on one activation's worth of movement. And that's before you include the fact that this can combo with things like a Spirit Shaman or Adrenaline Rushes, or even just discarding to get it an extra 3 inches of movement. So this guy can run pretty much anywhere on the board, can test pretty much any relic on the board, can get really good positioning to then deploy off of turn 2. Usually what I'm using these guys for is setting up essentially my turn 2 deployments. So best case scenario for me, a Tarok Beast is getting deployed turn 1, hammering 20 inches up the board, contesting a relic, and also like setting me up a really good sight line for a charge for Thundersteps or somebody else. Turn 2. In an even better scenario, I've got 2 of them going to the opposite ends of the board, at which point I now have so much variety in where I can deploy kind of what I need to deploy. If I've got initiative, which hopefully I do because Thundersteps loves to have the initiative, then I can, make my opponent deploy first before I then even commit to which Tarok Beast I'm going to deploy off of. It just gives you so much board control. It's insane. And then on top of that, he actually kind of hits like a truck. He with 10 health, units with 3-1 are going to struggle to kill him in even across 2 activations. Especially because he's got 11 defense. Like 11 defense isn't that high. But equally, if your opponent grazes twice, then you don't kill him across 2 activations with most other basic units. It's loads of little things like that that add up to just make the Tarok Beast punch so far above its weight for what it does. The only downside to it is that it has clumsy. So it can't be picking up any relics for you, which sucks. But also, you can just drop a Spirit Shaman off of it or something, or drop a Cabra Mauler off of it, or drop literally anything off of it, and just stand there and pick it up next turn. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'd say they're a gold standard for chaff.
Yeah.
The important thing is that they can just get up, and even though they're clumsy, they can sit there and stare at you from across the relic and stop you from picking it up.
Yeah.
And man, it's just the worst feeling to be like, okay, I really need to get, even like if I've got initiative and there's a relic like um like a Reaper's Edge or something that, both of us want, and you know, I would love to pick that up, but my relics are being contested, and so now your shaman or whatever that's standing on your back line is just gonna happily take that.
Yeah. I
Also,
think. Oh, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, you said that there was only a couple of 2-cost units, and you forgot the Curse Host Boar, and
Oh, I did.
I think that's slander that I just can't have on my podcast. So
No,
we're gonna
you are
have to
so
end it
correct.
here. Um,
I'm disappointed in myself that I forgot about it, because when I play Ingor, I'm thrilled that I basically have 6 Tarot Beasts at that point, because they do pretty much the same thing, except that a Curse Host board just explodes at the end of it, which is kind of better. The only downside with a Curse Host Boar is that they have less health and don't go as fast. Otherwise, they are very close for kind of best basic unit, period, not just Primal Blood basic units.
Yeah, there's also that little thing where if you play them incorrectly, your opponent can get a bunch of free damage off of a cursed host board.
Yeah, which is true.
All right.
Yeah.
So moving on to my choice for basic. I went ahead and went with Adrenaline Rush. Bodhi, do you have the card for Adrenaline Rush on?
I sure do. It's a 3-cost basic spell channel, and it says an ally performs an action or uses an ability that costs 1 action point.
Simple as. Simple as. Well, you were just, Drake, a little while ago, you were talking about how action points are kind of one of the dearest and least plentiful resources you're going to need to win in this game. And this spell alleviates that problem. The fact that it's not just a move and not just like a generic attack, it can be anything. It could be a wild strike. It can be anything on any unit that costs 1 AP. And there's a surprising amount of like weird little actions that a lot of units can take. Just the amount of utility you get out of the spell is crazy. It's kind of like a beefier version of Leastrum Stride is the only way I would describe it. It does cost a fair amount more, but if you're playing Thundersteps, you're probably going to have a couple totems on the board at some point. So I find that like Echo is not actually one of the resources that I have to worry about too much with Thundersteps. Between prey from the totems and just the general low cost of most things in his list, you can generally throw this around with some impunity. The real thing is just going to be the opportunity cost of what you're going to use it on. And of course, the gold standard is to have Thundersteps himself make an attack or maybe just a move with it when he needs to. But this can go on anything. If that Tarok Beast really needs to kill that priest who's at 2 health, and you just want to, throw it down, that's the thing to do with it.
If that Tarot Beast needs to go 30 inches across the board to contest a relic that's about
Exactly.
to lose you the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The totems are also 2-cost.
There you go.
I have a controversial opinion on the totems, which I've just remembered, which I might save for the hot takes. We'll come back to them. But
Okay.
yes, I suppose they are a unit that cost 2.
Circling back on totems.
Yeah.
Any other points on Adrenaline Rush?
I love the flavor text for Adrenaline Rush so much. Primal Blood Berserkers have a name for warriors that sit still. Corpse. It's just a really cool line.
You just gotta jitter around.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep moving, man. Just keep going. Yeah, I agree. I think it really plays off of, like I was saying earlier, action points are probably your least plentiful resource, and also to some degree the one that is most important for you winning the game. It's why swarm decks are so good, because you get more action points, and that's so important for winning the game. It is a great spell. I think the only reason that this wasn't my choice, kind of for a basic card, was because it's so dependent on what you play it on, for how good it is. If that makes sense. Like playing an Adrenaline Rush on Thundersteps is pretty much always going to be a good call. But playing an Adrenaline Rush on a totem refunds your Adrenaline Rush. Like, I mean, I know there's realistically no reason you would ever do that, but you see my point. Like, whereas a Tarot Beast is consistently good on its own, Adrenaline Rush is dependent on other things.
I did actually have a game where I adrenaline rushed into a prey because I used the adrenaline rush on Starcast hulls, so it cost 2.
So
And
you got one echo.
I needed it for like an endless rage, and I won
Fair
the
enough.
game. Like
Excellent.
really stupid.
I mean, I can't fault any of your tactics ever, seeing as was it you that I played a game against where you corpse explosion Vorendal and won the game?
No, I
No.
didn't win that game, unfortunately.
Oh
That was
no.
against your board. No, that was the game we played before where I managed to get 4 relics on the first
Yeah,
round.
yeah, that was yep. That was that one. Yes, that was a terrible game. And the
Yes.
less said about that is the better. Uh, but
Alrighty.
yeah.
Well, let's move
Uh,
on to some elite stuff. So, why don't you tell us about your selection for your elite card?
So my elite choice is the Tarok Beast. I've put this down. Like, I genuinely, I have an actual answer, but like, I genuinely think that the Tarok Beast is the best unit in the game, and I will say this to anybody that gives me the time of day to listen to me. I've gone on about it at length, and I probably should have saved at least one or two little tidbits of information about the Tarok Beast. But like, I will say it's probably not uncommon for me in a game where I start with 2 Tarok Beasts in hand, to then be able to deny like all of the relics across the board and probably pick up 1 or 2 myself, kind of thing. Like, they're just so good. Um, but my serious answer is the Boneclaw Raider. I think the Boneclaw Raider is kind of an unsung hero, in the
Let
Primal
me read
Blood
it out.
faction.
Let me read it out real
Go for
fast.
it.
It's basically just Tarek Beast with a mask and shaved legs, but it's a 6 cost unit human. It's got an accuracy of 2, a power of 4 on a hit, and 2 on a graze. It's got a range of 0, a speed of 6, a defense of 12, and a health of 12. And it's got dash. During this unit's activation, it may perform a free move, and nimble. This unit can move without provoking retaliation. When I like first bought all of my product for this game and was teaching a couple friends at the Star Wars Armada setup at Adepticon, I was playing with just the basic starter decks, and this very quickly became my favorite card because it just runs everywhere and you can't tie it down. It She's just awesome. I love her a
Yeah,
lot.
I fully agree with that. I think, yeah, I think it gets overlooked initially, or I should say, I overlooked it initially, because my young naive Thundersteps playing self looked at the Blood Frenzy Berserker and went, well, the Blood Frenzy Berserker has more health, it moves faster as a base, and it has Berserk. Why would I take this thing over the Blood Frenzy Berserker? And then I played, I don't know how many games with the Blood Frenzy Berserker where the Blood Frenzy Berserker did nothing but die and give my opponent 7 mastery. And then eventually one day I was like, right, I'll try the Boneclaw Raider. And then the Boneclaw Raider just massively outperforms, um, at the very least, the Blood Frenzy Berserker, but also to some degree quite a lot of stuff. In my opinion, the kind of the main benefits of it are, like, everybody that plays Malediction understands how incredibly useful, the boots of celerity are, um, to the degree that they rarely really need to get mentioned, um, in kind of any situation of like, hey, what's a good relic? Because the boots are always a good relic. The Boneclaw Raider basically comes pre-equipped with boots,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal. So you can do all of the dumb stuff that you do when you have the boots on with the Boneclaw Raider already. If you're already in engagement, you can hit twice and still move out and not get hit back, which is incredible. You can, and especially with Primal Blood, like, or sorry, I should say with Thunderstep specifically, like the flexibility of being able to move out and kind of fully reposition yourself, like with a full 6-inch move, to try and get those little kind of kicks back into, the Flesh Gardens is really, in my opinion, where the Boneclaw Raider thrives. Like that whole little combo of like it kind of doesn't matter how well my opponent is doing their positioning if I've got a Boneclaw Raider on the field, because a Boneclaw Raider can come right up to you, skim all the way around you, and then still kind of get a knockback off and push you where I need you to go. And it's great. And especially when you then combine that with, I think I said this earlier, like the little 3-inch discard move of the fact that you can move out with a Boneclaw Raider, charge back in, and move out again is just real nice for that flexibility. If you only need to get a little reposition to make that knockback really effective, and still want to kind of like, and I don't know, you were next to something else. Like it's just so unbelievably flexible in its positioning. And I think it really highlights how important positioning is in the game over just kind of raw damage for what actually makes a good unit. Is on like I was saying, yeah, on paper the Blood Frenzy Berserker kind of looks better, but then when you actually understand how to play the game, the Boneclaw Raider is, in my opinion, a much better unit.
Yeah, I think that all of that is very true. It's kind of the scalpel unit for your list. You can just have her apply a bunch of damage. That is something that she is capable of at the best of times, and being able to hit twice and then leave, or get in and then hit twice, are both pretty cool. Um, I honestly reminds me. She's got the same cost as the Momentum Weaver, and while they are very similar in terms of what they do, I think their place in a list is pretty similar, and that they are there to kind of pick out specific targets or secure a specific relic um, using their abilities. And I don't know, I think in a faction that their whole thing is they want to get close quickly. She's excellent at that. And she's a bit more expensive than you often want to see for units of this type, but she can get to a relic really, really, really quickly. Um, top of the round, basically. She can get over to something at the very start of the game. So I have 2 of her in my deck.
Yep. I affectionately refer to her as my relic delivery system.
Yes.
In a lot of games, like it's really not uncommon that she'll run to a relic in the ass end of nowhere kind of thing that most people probably aren't going to bother contesting because it's in a really weird position or something along those lines. That'll be a time where a Boneclaw Raider really shines because first turn they can run over, pick it up, and they're way off out of the way. They're too far away that anybody's going to bother trying to deal with them, and then they then come screaming 18 inches across the board to sit next to the person that actually wants the relic. At which point they can probably run off and pick up another relic as well, because they've not really done any combat at this point and they're still running around at full health, which is really helpful.
Yeah, you don't want her often like in the meat grinder because she is just a little too fragile for that.
Yeah.
However, what she's really good for is like bullying backline stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you want to have her be the person to go bother the priests or the conclave scholar, or go knock over your opponent's totems, she's perfect for that.
It's funny that you bring up Momentum Weavers. I usually send her after Momentum Weavers.
Exactly. Yeah, she's also good at disrupting other like strong ranged units that kind of want to be left alone.
With the 18-inch move, and especially with the free 6-inch move followed by a 12-inch charge kind of thing, it's very difficult to position a ranged unit in such a way that she's both going to be like, you have a choice essentially of, do you want to be in range of the Boneclaw Raider, at which point the Boneclaw Raider can charge you and also move away from you, or do you want to be outside of the range, or do you want your guy to be like, so they can't shoot the Boneclaw Raider, at which point the Boneclaw Raider can probably still free move and shoot and charge you anyway. So
yeah, go disrupt those crossbowmen.
Yeah.
Like she's great for that. All right, for my pick, I took Trial of Stone, which I guess might be kind of cheating, because I also had Adrenaline Rush as my bronze. But if you have that for us, Bodhi.
It's becoming really clear that you like playing spells.
Yeah,
Ooh,
you don't think?
weird.
So Trial of Stone is a 2-cost spell channel. An ally performs a melee attack. Then the defender performs a melee attack against that ally. The owner of the unit that dealt the highest damage draws a card.
Yup. And I think it's pretty key to note that you make your attack first. So, if your opponent is dead at the end of your swing, then you just proceed to step 3 and
Yep.
get your card. Really, really good, especially because, well, this is kind of what Primal Blood leans into, not just Thundersteps, but a lot of them they just hit a bit harder than whatever their equivalent is in other factions. So, there is a possibility of you whiffing and not getting a card. That could occur. And the way the card is worded, if you both get the same amount of damage, I don't think anybody gets a card.
Nope.
But as Drake has mentioned, you are on a clock with these guys. You need to deal damage very quickly, even if it involves your own stuff dying. And I think the card is almost an afterthought. Like, don't get me wrong, it's really cool and all, but it's cost 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really good. It's as good as an adrenaline rush a lot of the time if you set up to kill somebody. And a lot of the times, like, if you're not pushing people away, if you want to keep them in, you've charged somebody and it's like, oh, you hit them for 5 damage and now they're down to 3 damage. This is exactly the card you need to finish the job.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There are loads of really fun little combos as well. Like, combo is maybe the wrong word, but there are some really funny interactions that can happen with Trial of Stone. If you've got the Relic Vengeance and Retribution on, for example, then you can still trigger counterattacks during the midst of this. So you hit your opponent, you force them to hit you back, and then you've got Vengeance and Retribution, so you just hit them again. Which is hilarious. And at that point, it's like, I don't care if you did more damage on the first attack and then drew a card. I'm going to do more damage overall. Like, this is happening.
Yeah.
There's lots of kind of really fun little things. It's also things as well. Like, I like to use this to get Thundersteps down into Berserk. Like, if I will essentially quite often start off an engagement. Like, I'll activate Thundersteps and I'll go, okay, Thundersteps has got like 13 health left. Fantastic. Let's Trial of Stone this out. I'm gonna hit you, even if I graze. Oh no, I've done 3 damage and I get hit back. And oh, look at that. I have now taken just enough damage to get berserked, and I've still got 2 attacks left. You're screwed, buddy.
Enjoy your 1 card.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, it is quite rare to be in a situation where you're playing Trial of Stone and your opponent is in a position to do more damage than you. Like, I think if you're playing Trial of Stone in those situations, you're probably playing Trial of Stone wrong. Which is ironic because in the lore, the whole point of the Trial of Stone is that, like, you're meant to kill something that's stronger than you, and I use this to beat up things that are weaker than me, like, almost exclusively. But yeah, it is a great card for exactly that same reason of action points are limited. Give me more action points.
Well, while we're on the topic of getting more action points, let's talk about Endless Rage. Unfortunately, there is no like fast zippy unit in the gold slot, so we can't have another Tarek Beast. But Endless Rage comes pretty close in a few ways. So it's a 5-cost spell swift, and it just says refresh an ally.
Oh boy.
Yes, Endless Rage is phenomenal. I think Endless Rage is a card where if you play it at the right time, you will probably win the game. There are very few ways to come back from Thundersteps going again. And as much as things like Unstoppable Rush kind of achieve a similar effect by giving you, 2 more action points, most Unstoppable Rush is limited in the fact that you can only do one thing that costs up to 2 action points. So most of the time you're gonna charge with an Unstoppable Rush, and then you're gonna hit twice. Whereas Endless Rage just lets you refresh a unit and go again. And the fact that it's done at swift speed as well makes this so unbelievably flexible. that you can, wait until everybody else is done and then go, cool, I'm now going to play Endless Rage. But, before we move on to the end step, I'm now going to swift speed Endless Rage, and I'm going to go again with Thundersteps, and your opponent's going to roll their eyes because they realize they've probably lost the game. You can go with Thundersteps. Your opponent will then kind of go, okay, well, I don't now need to worry about Thundersteps because he's already gone. I'm going to go with this other thing on the other side of the board, and you go, cool, and now I'm going to swift speed Endless Rage, and I'm going to reactivate Thundersteps, and I'm going to go with Thundersteps again. And your opponent goes, no, it's so bad. Yeah, I really do think it is one of these cards where I think there are very few cards like this in the game. But if you play Endless Rage at the right time, you'll probably win the game. Is my experience with it. Unless you get a nat 1 after you refresh Thundersteps, and then you've lost. But
I think each faction has like a unique spell that just kind of wins the game if it resolves under the right circumstances. Like you've got Demanifest,
Yeah.
and whatever the yellow one is that makes you discard cards. Like
Enforce
both of
balance
those, yeah, enforce balance. Those are so game warping, and
and
I like
unmake.
that. I like
So
that they're here in the game because it feels like a good strong thing to do, and it doesn't feel like the game is coming to a incorrect conclusion. But there are definitely things to be aware of when you're playing against these decks.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, each faction definitely had one of these things, and I think it's something that you need to be aware of playing against them. But also, it's something that you need to play well as the person playing this deck in order to actually make it a game-winning spell. Like you say, Demanifest is a game-winning spell, but it's probably not going to win the game if you demanifest a Tarok Beast turn 1. Like that, that's not how you win the game with Demanifest. And it's kind of the same thing with Endless Rage. Like, you're not going to win the game with Endless Rage if you use it to refresh a Cabra Mauler, that then tries to swing twice more into, I don't know, Sigrith or something. It's very situational, but if you play it right, it's winning the game. And I think it's important to, like I've been saying kind of through the whole thing, Thundersteps will teach you how to play the game well, and Endless Rage is one of those cards that you will learn how to play this card well, or you will lose the game.
For sure. On another spell note, we've got Cataclysmic Blast. So this is Ethan's choice. I love this card. It's probably my favorite card in Primal Blood. And it's a 4-cost spell channel. Choose a single point on the battlefield, deal 5 damage to all units within 3 inches of that point. And the way that you resolve this is just so interesting and unlike anything else in the game or miniatures games in general. Like I've never played a card in a game that says to choose a single point on the battlefield before, and that's just cool. But Ethan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Cataclysmic Blast?
it's just kind of the de jure AoE damage spell in the game. Just a moment, I'm going to cough. There is very little in the way of AoE in this game in general. There's a lot of stuff that targets specific units or allows you to move specific units, but this and Heartstab Blast, Red kind of has the market cornered on explosions. I guess with the one exception of Corpse Explosion. But Red has it more than anybody else, where it's just like this is going to hit multiple things at the same time. It's a real doozy. I'd say that it's almost universally applicable. There are going to be better times for it if you've already hit a couple things and your opponent, a good opponent, especially if they have access to heal, like if you're up against a Sigrith or something, will often cycles things because, they'll be able to heal them and bring them back into the fight later. And it's like, oh, those 2 backline units that have, 3 health each that you moved back because they both took charges. Well, they're gone now. I'm sorry. And because people often play defensively against Red, they will, more often than you might think, box themselves into a corner, which has its advantages. It means you can focus fire. There are good reasons to kind of cluster up in this game, and this spell is really good at punishing that. It's good at punishing one of the main strategies people use to get around the strengths of Red, and I think that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is a card as well where the flavor text to some degree tells you how you're going to be using this card. They're just mindless savages. Stand together and they won't break our formation. And then you drop a cataclysmic blast on that formation. I personally run this in my side deck for pretty much the reasons that you described. But that's just because I have kind of a very specific goal in mind with my Thundersteps deck, which against most people, Cataclysmic Blast is probably not going to do very much. But in the reason it's in my side deck is because, like you say, there is out there, those tricksy people that like to stand in formation and stand together and be in a group, and this is just so punishing to them. Anybody that runs a protection kind of base deck is going to really suffer, because now all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, you can protect, but now you're going to be taking 10 damage on something because I've dealt 5 damage to it, and now you have to make a decision of, do I protect 5 damage into something else? Which is, yeah, I think it's incredibly punishing for those specific playstyles. I think it does work. It is a really kind of universally good card. But the reason it's in my side deck is just because those are the matchups where I get the most value out of it. And it'll be the kind of thing of like, I'll probably swap out, I don't know, like I run Hunter's Sense, which I know a lot, often raises eyebrows when I say that to people. But this is the kind of thing that I'll be trading my Hunter's Sense out for, is a Cataclysmic Blast if I'm playing against Sigrith or Londriel.
Yep. You'll notice there are no gold units in our top choices because none of them are very good.
Yeah. Another thing that I like to talk about in this section are some cards to avoid when you're deck building. It's actually kind of ironic that you mentioned Hunter Sense, because I was browsing through this, just the offerings of cards in Primal, and that's kind of one of the ones where, I mean, I see the use case. It's definitely not terrible, but it's probably lower on my own personal list of cards. The one that I do want to mention that I don't quite see the use case is Consume Carcass, which is a
Yep.
2-cost spell channel. However, it can be played as a quicken, or sorry, as a swift with the quicken ability, as long as a unit has entered a discard pile. And you banish a unit from any discard pile. If you do, an ally recovers 3 health. So healing is definitely limited in this faction, but the rate that you're paying for Consume Carcass is pretty low. I mean, Sigrith effectively gets 3 health from 1 card and 0 echo.
Yeah.
Here you're paying 2. And I mean, I guess there's some utility if you're against a Morida, and that's the only reason that I can think of the banishing a unit coming into play. But I mean, maybe when we see more Seekers down the line, we'll see another Necromancer type that wants to have units in their discard pile. But
Yeah.
are there any cards that you think are not even close to making the cut?
That's a great question. I mean, I know that there are some that I kind of never include. That is definitely one of them, for kind of all the reasons that you've listed. And also, when we're kind of talking about the the action point economy of the game, like Consume Carcass functionally gives you back like 1 action point's worth of damage on a low damaging unit, which just really isn't worth it, in my opinion. I think that there are a couple. I've brought up the list for myself now. Fortune's Favor is one. I have never found use for Fortune's Favor. I think it's it's one of those cards where I can understand why people would enjoy the certainty of knowing that you've got a hit, but I think once you then kind of understand the fundamentals of the game, you then realize that guaranteeing a hit often isn't worth it, and you could just hit again. So why would I bother with that?
Yeah. Fortune's
Nature's
favor is after a player makes an attack roll, roll an extra die, use either of the die results to resolve the attack. And I play one of my locals has cerebral palsy, so I'll be the one like playing my own game, and then I'll be, playing the cards for him. Um, and there was a game that we played where he had a Fortune's favor sitting in his hand the entire game. And there was never a case where it would have been used like every attack roll that I made that was like a hit, you know, even if
yeah.
making me re-roll to make it a graze, like it wouldn't have mattered. And every roll that he made that was a graze, that like re-rolling it into possibly a hit, it still wouldn't have mattered. So he ended up bidding it on the last turn of the game because he was like, "There's no reason to have this card."
I think
Yep.
yeah, like when you do kind of the maths on probability, this is effectively kind of the same as giving yourself like advantage in something like D&D. And I did the maths on this, like similar things, for D&D and probability a while ago, for different reasons. And most of the time, this kind of equates to essentially around a +4 to hit at most, and like a +2 to a +3 at least. So like you're really not kind of getting a massive benefit to hit. You're not really like it's not giving you any extra attacks. It's just giving you a slightly better chance of hitting with the attack that you've just done. So I don't really see it as all that useful. I think if you gave people a card, right, that said, after an attack gain +3 to hit, nobody would ever run that card. You know what I
Plus,
mean?
like Brewing Fate, and we talked about that in our Polynor episode of Don't Run It.
Yeah.
Mm. All right,
Yeah, it's
well,
just you could have been doing something worth more time.
yeah. So before we talk matchups, let's go into our relic section. So Lawrence has identified 3 relics that really make a difference, ones that you have high on your pick order for Thundersteps. As always, the boots are going to be an honorable mention. We I've identified that would be the best choice for basically every seeker in the game. So we put it in honorable mentions. We don't talk about it again.
Yep.
The other honorable mention that Lawrence has selected is the staff, the lightning staff.
Scepter.
Yeah, scepter of
The
whatever
Tempest
it is.
Scepter.
Yeah, that's the one. But let's talk about your top 3. So in third place, you've got the Trapjaw Chain, which says this unit gains range +6 and pull 6. Whenever this unit scores a ranged hit, it may pull the defender up to 6 inches. And it also says whenever an enemy becomes engaged with this unit by being pulled by it, that enemy suffers 3 damage. I don't see a whole lot of range on the primal units, so what makes the Trapjaw Chain so good?
6 inches is essentially the same as most of your unit's movement. So you don't want to look at this card as increasing your range. You're looking at this card as essentially giving you a free movement so long as you hit. And also doing more damage. So and also then, because I like running the flesh gardens, potentially dragging somebody through a flesh garden on the way towards you, kind of thing. So it's incredibly flexible. It frees up your kind of need to use your action points to move, and instead you can use them to attack. And because range attacks are exactly the same as a melee attack, other than the fact that you do them further away, your now kind of very high damage units are now doing quite high damage at 6 inches, which is great. Yeah, I think it's those are kind of the big ones. Like it is very flexible. It functionally it doubles most of your units' threat ranges. That you can kind of do in a turn, if that makes sense as well, because you could still move 6, pull 6, where before you'd have to like charge in order to do that. So you can, move around corners, and like you can move up to a corner and then shoot something that's trying to hide around the corner. Like it just gives you a lot of flexibility, it kind of in that space. And the extra 3 damage is nothing to sniff at.
Yeah.
And it
I
counts as an additional source of damage as well, which is nice for a couple of different little interactions of like, you have, if you're going to try and prevent this damage, you have to choose, you're preventing that 3 damage or you're preventing the damage from the attack kind of thing. And they don't actually add to get, unless I'm getting that wrong. I might be getting that wrong, but I'm pretty sure they don't add together. Like I think the Trapjaw Chain deals 3 damage to you when you pull them into range, and then the attack still deals its damage, and they count as 2 sources of damage.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
correct.
have a Boneclaw Raider, have them shift out of melee with Thundersteps Legacy, have them pull somebody in, deal the extra damage, have them walk out, and then have them pull somebody in again and do even more extra damage.
Yep.
I will also say that just goes to show you, like, this game does not have separate melee skill and range skill. It's if somebody is a big scary unit in melee with a high to hit bonus, they're gonna have a high to shoot bonus if you give them a gun.
Yeah. It's the same reason why the lightning staff is in here. There's nothing funnier than putting the Tempest Scepter on Thundersteps and then making like a couple of free ranged attacks against somebody with Thundersteps.
Yeah, that checks out. In the same vein of free attacks, your number 2 selection is the Fang of the Damned. So this unit gains once during this unit's activation. It may suffer 3 damage to perform a free attack. If this attack scores a hit, the unit recovers 5 health.
The only reason for me that this isn't my number 1 with Thundersteps, because this is, in my opinion, this is doing a very similar thing that the boots are doing, and that every Seeker, in the same way that every Seeker benefits from the boots, every Seeker benefits from free melee attacks. Well, free attacks, I should say. Every Seeker benefits from free attacks. The only reason that this isn't my number 1 is because Thundersteps doesn't necessarily always want to be gaining health. As much as you always want to be making attacks with Thundersteps, sometimes gaining the 2 health from the Fang, the difference between the damage that you take and the health that you gain can really screw you over. If you play it right, you can kind of do a little dip your toe kind of effect, where you take the 3 damage to dip yourself into Berserk, and then you heal for 5 to get yourself out of Berserk. But I am a big fan of trying to kind of, for a lack of a better word, redline Thundersteps and keep him in Berserk to the best of my abilities.
Does that work? Because it says when the unit scores a hit, but you like have scored a hit before the damage actually ends up happening. So I don't think that you can get the damage from Berserk. So like if you
I
score a
guess
hit,
not.
yeah, you score a hit, you immediately heal back up, and then you deal the damage.
That's a good point.
Which that is the main thing that makes me a little sad, because if you could order it where like you got the healing at the end
Yeah.
and be able to like control your own berserk in a way, that would be so cool. Because you did mention earlier in the episode how your opponent has to be the one to deal the damage to you. You
Yeah.
have no control over that yourself. And Reaper's Edge would in theory be one of the ways that you could, but
other than just standing in the flesh gardens for the first 2 turns that he's on the field, yeah, you can't do anything
yeah.
to get him into it deliberately.
Has there ever been a time that you've done that? Just like took a little bath?
Not specifically stood in it for 2 turns, but there are a lot of games where I kind of am like, you know what, I am going to make this charge directly through the middle of a Noxious Flesh Garden because A, you have positioned in such a way that you're not expecting me to do that, and B, it's going to get me to Berserk. So yeah, I'm absolutely going to charge that. I think it's kind of this idea like that we briefly touched on in the terrain is that people look at the Noxious Flesh Garden as a no-no zone, and you can really use that to your advantage. It's just more Thundersteps gaslighting. It's what it is.
All right, well, let's talk about our number 1 relic, which has made an appearance on a couple of these lists now. We've got the Reaper's Edge.
It's
This
back.
unit gains Melee Expert 2 while performing a melee attack. This unit gets +2 power. Essence Binder 3. Whenever an enemy is defeated during this unit's activation, you gain 3 Echo, and non-seeker enemies defeated by this unit are banished.
The main reason that this is my top relic choice is there is nothing better than landing a crit on the charge while Thundersteps is berserked, and doing, I think it's 19 damage. You get 10 for the crit, 2 for berserk, so we're at 12, 3 for devastate, so 15, 2 for melee expert, 17, and then 2 for the charge, so 19. So you kill every other seeker in the game except Thundersteps in 1 hit if you meet all of those conditions. And that is the greatest thing in the world whenever that happens. And I don't care that it happens once in a blue moon. It's happened more than once, and I will forever be chasing that feeling for the rest of my life. Because it's amazing. The fact that you get some echo is a nice little bonus on top of that. Like you essentially get enough of echo from Essence Binder to do an adrenaline rush, which is great as well. No, there's no downsides to this one in my opinion. It's consistent. It's useful for the rest of your play style, and it just makes Thundersteps absolutely terrifying. And frankly, it makes kind of any unit that you put it on quite scary, especially when you consider the fact that you're also then getting +2 damage on the charge. So it means that a Boneclaw Raider gets pushed up to a 6/4, which then on the charge is doing 8/6. It just makes every unit in your roster into another Thundersteps on the charge.
It's good for almost exactly the same reasons it's good with everybody else. It's just more damage. More damage is good. Free echo is good.
Yep.
Occasionally, you'll screw over a Morida or an Ingor by being like, "No, that didn't go into your discard." Actually, simple as.
Bye. Get out of here. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, let's. We're starting to run a little bit long, but let's take a few minutes to talk about some of the good matchups, some of the bad matchups. What are the decks where your opponent flips over their Seeker, you see it, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a good game. What do you want to see a little bit less? And then maybe talk to me a little about your sideboard and some cards that you include to help for those bad matchups.
Good matchups is anything where your opponent is running units with small amounts of health and doesn't have persist. So pretty much you go into Morida, Polynor, Ingor to some degree, kind of anything along those lines. Like if you're predominantly playing a swarm deck made up of little guys, then you're probably in a good spot because Thundersteps is then going to be getting lots of cleaves. The rest of your units are now doing like a good amount of damage, especially on the charge, and things of that kind of nature. Like it just ends up working out kind of that little bit nicer for you in general, rather than kind of I guess immediately going into the bad matchups compared to going against people like Sigrith and Londriel, where you're trying to kind of crack this shield wall. And they've got a lot of health, they've got a lot of extra wounds by virtue of protection. It ends up, it doesn't matter if I'm doing 18 damage on a crit. If you've got a True Stone Exemplar and you can block 10 of it, yeah, it's cool that I did that much, but also I'm kind of out of luck now. Yeah, so I think those are those are kind of the principles behind what are the good and bad matchups. Anything where I can get more cleaves is the good matchup, and anything where I can't get more cleaves is the bad matchup.
What kinds of side deck cards do you include?
So I briefly touched on this earlier. I include the AoE spells in my side deck for this exact reason. So in my opinion, the way to get around the kind of shield wall protection nonsense is just do more damage than they can feasibly kind of shift around, and more importantly as well, kind of the more sources of damage that you can create, the better as well, to some degree. Because obviously all of the protection spells you can only protect against one source of damage. So it was why why I was saying earlier that the Trapjaw Chain is quite a useful one, because even if you block all of the damage on the hit, I'm still pulling you in. I'm still dealing that 3 damage from the Trapjaw Chain. You're still going to take that unless you choose to block that separately as well. And so kind of for the same reasons, Cataclysmic Blast is quite helpful. Heartstab Blast is quite helpful because it just kind of spreads out more damage that your opponent kind of now has to deal with. And it's, in my opinion, against protection, it's better to do 5 damage to 2 different things than it is to do 10 damage to one thing, if that makes sense. Because if they want to block 5 damage to 2 things, then they're going to have to play Ward of Valkyries twice. Whereas if you want to, block 10 damage from one thing, you play 1 Shield of Androvon, you play, 1 Ward of Valkyries, and you've effectively half that damage, things like that. So it just makes that math significantly more harder for the Order players. And so that's why that goes in my side deck. I don't think you need anything in your side deck to help you against people with squishy units, other than maybe like sometimes, depending on just vibes, I might I've got Farsight Ambushes in my side deck, and sometimes I might trade out some of my spells if I'm playing against Pollinor or Londriel, or anybody that has access to counter spells realistically. Where, especially in organized play, where if I can see your deck beforehand and I know you've got counter spells, then to some degree I might trade out some of my spells with some Farsight Ambushes. But even then, like, I'm reasonably confident in my abilities these days to bait my opponent into countering an Adrenaline Rush so that I can then go immediately into like a Trial of Stone or an Endless Rage or something, and then they go, no, I've played my counter spell already.
Yep. I'd
Makes
say
sense.
that's pretty fair. Yeah, you don't really think of range so much. You think of red in this game, but I do like the idea of the bow guys aren't super synergistic with your general game plan, but hey, they're there if you really are in a situation where you have to get stuck in. They are there to provide solid shots.
They work really nicely in a side deck as well, because if your opponent takes the Death Shroud Maya, then they have ambush. And I think that's usually where I'm going to be subbing them in is if they've got if my opponent has Death Shroud Maya, then at that point my opponent is probably planning on putting 1 or 2 relics in the Death Shroud Maya, and is at that point I have at least some chance of kind of contesting those relics relatively early doors, which is always quite nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's pretend like you've just gone to the UK Games Expo, picked up Malediction, and your local is the one and only VictusDrake. So you know he's got Thundersteps, and he's ready to stomp on some heads. But how do we beat this Seeker?
Uh, it's funny that you mentioned that specifically because my local don't like it when I play Thundersteps. I played Thundersteps in the kind of the first proper all right, this is our organized play night. We're all playing to win here. And I played Thundersteps and I played 3 people and I beat all of them in the first 2 rounds and tabled all of them. After that, everyone was like, "I don't like this. What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm sorry. I didn't think this would happen." um, but yeah, I think the there are some big things that really matter. The main one is positioning. I think that's a huge thing against Thundersteps. If you position badly, even a little bit, Thundersteps will punish you for that in a huge way. You know, if you've got somebody that you think can't get knocked back, but you're wrong, and it can get knocked back, then Thundersteps is going to kick that person away from where you want it. They're going to isolate it, and they're probably going to bear down on it, and they're going to kill it. I think, and I think that ends up being the most important thing. In the same way that Thundersteps teaches you, the player, about how important positioning in is, Thundersteps teaches your opponents as well how important positioning is. I think as well, like the concept that I've touched on a couple of times throughout this of Thundersteps needs to win the game in 3 turns or he's going to lose it in 4. Is something to keep in mind when you're playing against Thundersteps. You can outlive Thundersteps. It's like, a boxing match against a heavyweight kind of thing. Like every time he swings, he's swinging hard and he's swinging heavy, but he's getting tired out. And if you can kind of dance around those and you can take those punches in places where it doesn't really matter, he's going to tire out. You can then suddenly come back, turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, and you can beat the crap out of him. And I think um, that's one of the really important things.
I think that even goes beyond just Thundersteps of depending on what you pull, a Thundersteps deck might be out activating you like 2 or even 3 to 1 at the start of the game. Like if you get lucky with your draws, you're just like 6 units and I can bring in Thunderstep. Like you can really dump a bunch of meat onto the board early because it's cheap. But if you have the right tools, which you don't always have, but I don't know, Twin Flames works pretty good on everything in that list. Like
Yeah.
you can focus down a lot of his little stuff. I've had games where I have beaten Thundersteps because I basically just ignore Thundersteps.
Yeah.
Like I play around him, I'll save like a telekinesis or something for him to keep him out of my way. But it's mainly like, yeah, I'm not gonna deal that 20 health to him. I'm gonna spend a bunch of time more realistically killing smaller things, and just he can hold that relic, and I'll still win at the end of the day after 5 rounds or something.
Yeah, I put this kind of in my notes for this somewhere a little bit earlier on, but like to some degree, Thundersteps is often played really well as a term that I universally recognize from Warhammer, which is calling him a distraction Carnifex, which comes from very old editions of Warhammer where Carnifexes were big and they were scary and they were hard to kill. But to some degree, you could kind of leave them alone as well. And they were very much there to be a distraction. And Thundersteps often does exactly that. Like there are games where you can't dance around Thundersteps, like if he's got the boots, either scouts or boots of celerity kind of thing. At that point, it's really hard to ignore Thundersteps if he's going real quick. But there will be games where you can ignore Thundersteps, and you should not waste the resources of trying to kill Thundersteps every game. Equally, though, this lends quite nicely into my last note that I had here, which is it is it is imperative with Thundersteps that you focus fire on his units. So, and it builds a little bit on your previous point as well, Ethan, of like that Thundersteps will probably be out activating you at the start of the game if he gets a good draw, by virtue of the fact that he's got lots of these cheap units. But at the end of the day, those are cheap squishy units, and you can probably kill them, but you need to kill them. There's no rewards for a half dead enemy. Like you say, the last health point that matters is the most important health point is the last one. A Cabra Mauler with 1 health does exactly the same amount of damage as a Cabra Mauler with full health. So I think, yeah, making sure that you're focusing down and you're kind of picking off any unit, really. Like if you decide I'm going to kill this thing, you need to make sure that thing dies before you move on. Is usually a good kind of strategy to keep in mind.
All right. Well, any final thoughts about Thundersteps before we move on into our final segment?
He's really good fun. He's usually the seeker that I tell people to kind of, if you want to try out the game, just play Thundersteps. He's good fun. He's really simple to pick up. He's got a really cool model. His art looks really nice. Yeah, I think he is probably the easiest seeker to get your head around. But there is, and I think it's why people will often turn their nose up at him as you kind of get a couple of games under your belt of like, well, Thundersteps is what I cut my teeth on. He's for baby Malediction players. But I hope that as the game goes on and more people kind of play the game more, that there's an appreciation of actually there is still quite a lot of depth to Thundersteps, and even if you learn to play the game with Thundersteps, and you now think that he's really simple, once you're a more experienced player, go back to him, have a couple of games with him, and really try and take advantage of everything that's available to him. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how much depth Thundersteps actually has to him.
Well, sweet. So for our final section tonight, we've got our community questions and hot takes. I'm starting to run a little bit low, so if you have any that you'd like to suggest for a future episode, don't hesitate to drop it in the Critical Grace channel or ping Ethan or I on the Discord, because we would love to answer your questions or talk about your terrible opinions. Speaking of terrible opinions, this one is courtesy of last episode's guest, Zog. And he says that Thundersteps is a bottom 3 seeker. How do we feel?
I was enraged when I heard this. Much like Thundersteps, I was immediately berserked. I think so. I think this kind of to some degree ends up leading quite nicely into my hot take, which is that I think that the idea of comparing seekers in that kind of way comes from like hero shooters like Overwatch or like MOBA type games like League of Legends type of thing, and I think that it actually is an unhelpful conversation in the realms of Malediction. I think that comparing seekers is about as useful as comparing colors in Magic the Gathering. I think it's trying to say that like Thundersteps is a bottom 3 seeker is like trying to say red is a bad color in Magic. Like I think if you try to take that to kind of any serious conversation about like balance in Magic the Gathering, you'd probably be laughed out of the door. And I think it's because like the deck building aspect of this is so important, but not just that. Like the actual gameplay is so important in this game. I think that I think this game ends up playing more like chess than it does like a typical war game, or it plays more like something like Magic the Gathering than it does like a typical skirmish game, because luck doesn't kind of influence the outcome of the game quite so heavily, because you can graze. which is such an important distinction from other games. The consistency of like what your units are going to be doing, kind of means that this game ends up being a bit more like chess, at which point it's like saying, white is bad in chess. It doesn't work. Like you can't have that conversation. It's impossible to have that conversation, because the things that actually matter in the game isn't the seeker. It's the positioning of your units. It's how you play the game. It's it's whether you play your cards at the right time. Things like that, rather than Thundersteps. His stats aren't great, which also is wrong. They're amazing. His stats are like some of the best in the game. But yeah, that's my hot take. I think questions of comparing seekers and comparing factions is a holdover from other games, and isn't helpful for discussions of kind of balance and what's good in this game.
Especially right now, because like if I were to say that like Ingor is bad, that would be saying that the combination of Primal and Legion is bad, because that's the only seeker that exists for that faction combination.
Yeah.
And so maybe in a couple of years, when we've got 4 different options for mono red, then we could say pretty firmly that Thundersteps is bad because all of the other mono red seekers are better. But right now, with only 10 options in the game, it's a little bit more difficult to make that comparison.
I'm not gonna say that I really agree with Zog flat out, but I will say that I know where he's coming from, because I have played some games where either because my opponent was really planning for it, or just because of kind of how the game state developed, Thundersteps got countered, like hard, capital C countered.
Yeah.
Like it just got to a point where I'm like, well, I'm standing here. Sigrith is about to grab a third relic, and there's 2 crossbowmen on the board, and I can't reach either of them. That's it. I feel like he has a lot of depth. Like there's a lot of deceptive complexity to a simple game plan, but I do feel like he loses really, really hard sometimes. When your opponent has set things up or like prepared for his line of attack, he can really get pigeonholed. So I do understand where he's coming from with that.
I do agree, and I think that this is why I say, and this is why I say to everybody that ever talks about playing Thundersteps, and it's why I say you win by turn 3 or you've lost by turn 4. And to some degree, I'm not meaning quite literally you've lost by turn 4, but if you don't have a plan where you have won the game by the end of turn 3, your opponent is going to be set up in such a way by turn 4 that you probably won't be able to come back from that in any meaningful way, unless something goes catastrophically wrong for them, or like you have done something amazing. I think that's what then, especially people that are kind of used to playing slightly longer games. If you mainly play Sigrith and you're expecting the game to go on for 5 or 6 turns kind of thing, then trying to shift that mindset of like, I have turn 1 to contest relics, and then turn 2, and like in turn 2 I need to be setting up to win in turn 3. I think people struggle with that kind of mindset.
Yeah, I feel you there. He's kind of fascinating because he goes from being extremely dominant and scary to getting dog walked, like really hard.
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
And it can be as simple as like 1 round of difference. Yep. It's kind of fascinating.
Yep. It usually is. I cannot explain the number of games where I have got to the end of turn 3 and been on 39 mastery, and I've been looking at the game and thought, damn, like that graze there that didn't kill, I don't know, that Valkyrist priest to get me 3 more mastery this turn, that's cost me the game. And I'm now going to go from 39 mastery to like 9. And I've lost, and my opponent's going to be sat on like 70.
It is interesting because he is like, in a lot of ways, he is like kind of a beginner friendly seeker, but I also feel like he's got kind of a high skill floor sometimes. If you're going up against people who have been playing the game for a while and kind of know his shtick, then I think his margin for error gets kind of slim, and I think that's what Zog might be talking about the experience with, essentially.
Yeah, I think he's got a real sharp, like exponential kind of skill curve, if that makes sense. Like, your basic level of skill required to play him, at a basic level is incredibly low. Like, if two fairly new people are playing the game, you can play Thundersteps however you want. You'll probably win a couple of games. But if you want to win consistently with him against people that have been playing the game for much longer, then you need to know what you're doing with him. And you almost need to have the game planned out pretty much from the word go if you want to try and win with him.
And
Oh, I
then
had a hot
Joey.
take about totems as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead and
Um,
give us that.
my hot take is that totems aren't a unit; they're a spell. Um, I think lots of people make this mistake, and I see it all the time, where people will make a Thundersteps deck, right? And they'll look at their deck at the end of it, and they'll go, "Cool, I've got 16 um, uh, I've got 16 units in my deck and I've got 14 spells in my deck, but they've ignored the fact that 3 of their units are primal totems, which means that then when you come to the very important maths of drawing your units, and one of them is a primal totem, you're stuck. Like, because that's not doing what a unit does. It doesn't do what you need units to be doing in a primal blood deck. It's doing almost what you need spells to be doing in a primal blood deck, if you see my point. And I think it's something I see a lot of people making the mistake of like, if you've got 3 primal totems in this deck, you need to account for that when you're actually kind of doing the maths of like how many units in inverted commas do I actually have in this deck though. They can't do anything. They're not like a priest. A priest
No,
can still
I
hit
feel you.
things.
I think that might be an interesting thing to treat them like spells for the purposes of building your deck around how many units you need, because they're not going to be doing unit stuff. That's for sure.
Nope. Can't move. They can't attack. They can't do anything. The only thing they give you is a pass activation, essentially, which can
Which
be
can
nice.
be, yeah, no, that can be really gnarly. I've had cute games where over the course of the game, it's like, oh, I got 3 of them. They are sitting in the corner, and as much as Thundersteps wants to be aggressive, the game state at the beginning of a round might not be where I want to go in. So it's like, okay, well, I'm getting 9 echo, and these 3 guys are just going to stare at each other back here in my deployment zone.
They're also really good for more famous Thunderstep gaslighting, where your opponent looks at your board side and goes, "Oh my god, he's got so many units deployed," and
Yep.
you're looking at your board side and thinking, "I've got 2 primal totems, Thundersteps, and a Capra Mauler. I have
I have
Thundersteps and a
2,
Capra
yeah,
Mauler."
I have 2 activations. That's they are cool for whatchamacallit, the ability to deploy off of them no matter what can come in clutch too.
It can, yes, occasionally.
Yeah.
But yeah, in my opinion, they fulfill the spell, or maybe even an attachment, than they do a unit when you're looking at them in deck building.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you for hopping on and spending 2.5 hours talking about a big red guy. Um, so thank you for your time. Do you want to make any shout outs? How can we reach you if people want to get in some games, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm on the Discord a lot, floating around. If you actually kind of ping me ever, and specifically ask me for a game, like I enjoy playing this game. I am very keen to play this game. So chances are, if you very specifically ask me for a game, I will try and find time to play a game with you. Um, I contribute to just about every game's rules discussion that I can, because I have a weird and maybe slightly masochistic love for getting really bogged down in those conversations. Also, if you live anywhere near the northeast of England, a herald up in the northeast of England. We've got a nice little community that play out of a local game store called Northern Alliance Games, which is in Newcastle, which is a lovely little space. I'm friends with the owner, Sam, and he's very kind of accommodating, and he also quite enjoys the game. So he's very keen. I'm currently in the process of kind of trying to expand out to newer stores. There's one called Clubhouse Gaming, which is also in Newcastle, kind of down on the quayside, which I'm trying to get set up in, and another one called Gecko Gaming over in Gateshead. I'm trying to get set up in. So if you're at kind of any of those stores or any places in the northeast, again, reach out to me kind of through the Malediction Discord. Let me know that you exist, and I'll try and make sure that you can get some in-person games as well.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Seriously.
No worries. It's great fun. I love talking about this game. I think it's great fun. I think it's one of the. It's such a kind of unique and interesting game that I've never played anything quite like it, and it's so much fun. And every single game is so kind of wildly different. The more people that I can get to kind of play this game and help to make it a success, the better.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next one.